Great.
Cool. Aaron, welcome to the Freedom Pack podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Aaron, such a pleasure having you here. Let's talk about affluenza.
Oh, good. Yeah, we can talk about affluenza. So essentially, that is a term that I learned from my buddy called Chris Ryan, who he recently had a book come out called Civilized to Death, that you guys might be familiar with. And essentially, I don't think he came up with the term, to be honest, but that's who I heard it first from. And affluenza is a disease that manifests itself in modern culture as a product of outsourcing our need to move and to essentially do things for ourselves, because instead we've permitted ourselves the luxury of technology doing those things that actually end up healing our body. So an example of that would be any type of like automated system. Say, for example, just as simple as like a garage door opener. As opposed to actually having to like move manually, go through that extension of your shoulders and do a little deadlift and pick or chopping wood or any of those things. Those all naturally heal and tune the body. Furniture is a very obvious example. Or toilets, Lord Crapper. It's like a indication of royalty that you sit at 90 degrees and you have your gold-studded toilet, and you sit above people on these chairs as opposed to sitting on the ground with peasants. And the peasants sitting in those ranges of motion, or going through those full ranges of motion with their hips and their ankles and their knees and circulating lymphatic fluid, and all of those different practices that are inherent in our human physiology and our history. We've kind of started to leave those in the modern affluent world. And it seemed cool at first, but we didn't realize that a lot of that stuff that seems kind of tedious or a pain in the ass is actually kind of like it's what circulates our bodies and keeps us healthy and well. And when we leave that, we start to kind of we become an American statistic essentially. And if you look at American statistics, it's not where you want to be at.
For sure. And I remember reading Dan Buettner's Blue Zone studies. And I remember in the book in which he talked about, those blue zones of places, the people that live the longest: Sardinia, Italy, Okinawa, Japan, Icaria in Greece. And one of the things in which they found was that the people that lived the longest, that they didn't necessarily have a specific exercise routine, but that their lifestyle enabled them to move without consciously thinking about it. Is that sort of similar to along these lines?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's what my whole book is about, really, is that all of these innate healing practices are just a part of what once was a natural environment for human beings, and we still have access to all of those things, but the healthiest cultures in the world aren't gym-based cultures. They're movement-based cultures, and they're community-based, and they're food-based, and they're celebration-based, and they're all these different things. But being in a gym, I was thinking about this yesterday with I think there's a natural inclination to want to exert ourselves and to want to build, and the Egyptians building pyramids, and we want to we want to exert and create and build these structures and evolve. And I feel like we've kind of mutated that innate urge to move and to exert into now it just being a purely superficial action, where it's like now instead of building a pyramid, it's like I'm just building my abs or building my biceps or building my pecs. And if you look at gym culture, I mean, it's like a huge waste of time in a lot of ways. Like the actions that people are doing many times are things that they could be building a house, or they could be out for a walk with their kids, or they could be climbing trees or playing, or they could, there's so many different things that they could be doing with their time. But we just exert so much energy in these these air conditioned, artificially lit boxes. But I think that value to gyms as well. I think it just should be like bonus extra credit, not something that you're dependent on. The thing that you should be dependent on, ideally, the mainframe of everything is your lifestyle. And then if your lifestyle is so saturated with all these health-inducing variables, then the gym just becomes this extra meditative bonus thing that you enjoy. But if your health is dependent on the gym, then that's very problematic for the human animal. And there's all sorts of research from various different places, NASA included, that gets into how that's a problem.
I just want to see how deep this goes. You gave the one example of technology of the garage door. I just wanted to ask you, what examples stick out in your mind as things that aren't just unnecessary but are almost detrimental to us?
As far as like the affluenza related things?
Yeah.
Well, just not going through a full rate, not getting up and down off of the ground would be a really big one. So cultures that spend time on the ground with any degree of regularity have minimal to no incidence of osteoarthritis in the hips. It's very low in the knees. Pelvic floor dysfunction is diminished. Fall risk is vastly diminished. It's almost like, what fall risk? What do you mean? Because I fall and I can't get up. That's not something that just all of a sudden happens because you turn 70. That's something that you've moved away from going through that full range of motion for long enough that it's like each day that chasm becomes like a centimeter longer and a centimeter longer and a centimeter longer until eventually you can't make that jump, and you have this atrophied space between your hips going down to like 90 degrees to sit on the toilet and the bed and the chair to all the way down to the ground. And then you're literally a risk to your tribe, and you lose your own physical autonomy, which is a huge deal as far as like pride and just a sensation of, feeling creative and confident and alive and sexy in your body. Those are all important things. Humans are emotional creatures. And if you lose your capacity to feel autonomous in your structure and you feel like you're just a liability to your family, emotionally, that's very draining. And then, that sets off a whole nother sequel of issues. So that would be a primary thing. It's just losing the need to go all the way up and down off of the ground with regularity. Everybody needs to be doing that every day. There's no way around it. I'm on my knees right now as I'm doing this. So I'm going to go back and forth, like being on one knee and then being on another knee. And so as I'm doing that, I'm like doing a toe sit kind of thing as well. So I can be opening up through my plantar fascia. And it's not weird. It's not wild. It's not revolutionary. It like literally just feels much better. Being in a repetitive position is the worst position for the human body. Doesn't matter what position you're in. There's nothing wrong with sitting in a chair, like at all. Sitting in a chair, there's no problem with it at all. It's just that we've been so inundated with that ever since you were placed into a stroller as a little person, and then a child seat, and then you go into kindergarten, and then you get, raised heel shoes, and then, there's like, the only problem with that position is just the insane amount of repetition with it. And now we have like a really serious problem, but there's no one position that's actually problematic. It's just too much, the dose is in the poison's in the dose.
And going back to the the gym thing for a second, if I'm thinking as a listener of this podcast now, people might be hearing this sort of information for the first time. They look you up on Google, they look at images, they think, this guy's he's a well-built guy, looks fit, he's got good aesthetics. There's no way he's not dedicated to the gym. What would you say is your system for the way you look aesthetically, would you say then?
I love the gym. I poop on the gym because I'm not dependent on the gym. If I don't go to the gym, it's not a problem. I go to the gym for more for almost like buddy Kelly Starr. He did the forward for the book. He describes like gym time as being like classical ballet training, and then your life could be like modern, so I think it's valuable to go back and refine those classical movements and have some type of not necessarily a program, but have some space or a time frame with regularity that you're going through, and you're really looking at, okay, how's the range of motion in my toes and my ankle and my knees and my hips and throughout my spine and my neck and shoulders and all the major joints, and just having that check-in with regularity, I think, is immensely valuable. And then also the meditative aspect of being in a gym. When I go to the gym, though, I work out outside, because that's, to me, is a huge cost of being in a gym, is missing opportunity to be in the sun. So I go to a place where I can take my shirt off and, wear a pair of shorts or hike my pants up or something like that. So I'm getting as much sun on my body as possible. I'm not wearing sunglasses, and I'm really like taking that sun variable as a meaningful part of my fitness, because it is. Also temperature regulation, so if you're in an air conditioned box or heated box or whatever it may be, you're missing out on a huge opportunity for your cells to respond to the temperature of their environment. So thermoregulation is a part of your fitness. So I like gyms, in short. It's just, if you're dependent on that and the rest of your day is void of what, any of us would consider to be like well-rounded wellness or fitness, or physical inhabitants, then you're totally missing it. Like, you need to make that be the iceberg, the part that's under the water, that's really holding up the structure. And then the tip of the iceberg is the gym time.
So an example of this would be, say, a 9-to-5 office worker, right? That throughout the day they may muster up 1,000 steps, and then 7 o'clock comes and they kill her in the gym, and then they go back to bed. Would that be would that be a lifestyle dependent on the gym?
It might be, but within that you could change a lot of things. So if a person, they're doing like a 9-to-5 job, and say it's like they have to be in a cubicle environment or something like that, there's things that they could do to change it. One would be putting if they're working on a computer, say, they're not necessarily, they absolutely would be, but a lot of people are, making sure that the computer is near a window so that you're able to take your eyes through a full range of motion with regularity. Think of almost like eye yoga. So the same way that temperature regulation is a form of movement for your body, so is visual regulation, going through a full range of motion of opening and closing those ciliary muscles and, all the muscles that control the lens of the eye. So that would be a big thing, and that's also directly tied into the state of your autonomic nervous system. So if you are chronically contracted, staring into little screens, like right now, again, as we're doing this, I'm doing this out on my porch, so I can look up at clouds. I'm around trees, so I'm breathing in the various different chemicals that the trees produce, which is helpful with boosting the immune system and generally just making you feel happier. Being around plants, this is still in relation to the same response to that question. Being around plants, patients that are in hospitals that have exposure, like even an open window or have plants and things like that to be able to look at, they end up having less necessity for pain meds, and they also get released much earlier. People that also have control of the usage of their pain meds oftentimes end up using less. So just that sensation of having control, being in nature, I think, gives you a certain sensation of like freedom and control in and of itself. Again, we're emotional animals. Things are bigger than just like pull-ups and bicep curls and all that stuff. Like getting into the emotional component of being human, that's when I think the conversation of fitness gets much more interesting. You could be taking walks with regularity as you are in your office. So you could do like a Pomodoro type technique and do 25-minute concentrated working, and then have a 5-minute break where you go take a walk, ideally outside, get around trees, take your shoes off if you want to get extra wild, expose as much of your skin to the sun as possible. Take your shirt off, man. Like if you're going to be inside a room all day long and you have a brief little sliver of time that you can get outside, when you get outside, take your fucking clothes off. Your body is a big solar panel. So when you have that opportunity to soak up some sun, you want to get it as any way that you can, essentially. When you're in your office, I'll wrap this up really quick. When you're in your office, ideally, if you could open up the window so you can get that full spectrum of light coming through, because windows will block out a certain percentage of the spectrum of light. I think it's usually the UVB will be blocked out by it. So you're getting essentially like a supplement form of sunlight when you are looking at the light through a window. So just because you're getting sun, you see light on your skin, doesn't mean you're actually getting the full whole food version of that sun. And there's lots of other things. As you're working, ideally, maybe you could. This gets a little wild. I know this won't work for everybody, but get like a floor cushion or something like that. Maybe you could put your computer on a couch or on a chair or something like that, and so you could actually be working from a 90-90 position or a straddle position or a crisscross applesauce position. You could be in a squat for a little bit. You could go up into a standing desk position after that. Then you sit on a chair, and it's no big deal. The only issue with the chair sitting is that we do it so freaking much.
Wow. So interesting to think about. So that would be one for, say, the employee. But now I got a 2-part question for you, right? The first part is, as an entrepreneur, no doubt that they would obviously have more autonomy to do this type of stuff. They'd have much more of a flexible lifestyle. A lot of people, which we know, either work from home or maybe work abroad in some sort of flexible capacity. But obviously, the downside, I would say, of that entrepreneur life is that it can be inherently stressful, right? I mean, you would know this yourself. You're an author. But what fascinates me about you, Aaron, is I look at you, and man, if I was to put money on it, I would be on the bet that Araron Alexander, if we just met, you seem completely stress free. Obviously, I know that with everything you got going on, I'm sure that isn't true. But so the 2 parts would be, how do you personally manage stress, and also for the entrepreneur listening, how could they also manage stress?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not stress free by any means. I think your perception is everything. It's like Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning stuff. You at any moment, everything could be much worse. And me being like a overprivileged, middle-aged, whatever, I don't know what middle-aged means exactly, but white dude living in one of the most affluent places on earth. For me to be down on myself about, oh my God, I have too much on my plate or this and that. One, I think it's completely okay to accept your humanity and be like, yeah, you know what? Like, I don't need to put myself into a double bind of being guilty about my guilt. So first of all, taking it easy on myself and saying, it's okay to be stressed right now. And then also having the other lens check of like, at any moment I could lose something that I would do absolutely anything to get it back. And I haven't lost that thing, and there's just an infinite list of things that you could lose at any time that like all of a sudden your whole life would be like, I would just give anything for that back. It's like, well, guess what? You have all of those things right now. So if you can reposition your perspective to like, man, all the shit that I have, this is just crazy. Like, it's unbelievable. So working with perspective is a big thing. And then the other thing is just maintaining joy in your day every day. If you're not actively engaging in joy each day, you're totally missing it. Like, you're completely missing the mark. And then, I think maybe that could perhaps bend for somebody if they're like saving the world or something like that. But I think in large part what the world needs is people that are celebrating their life. And so I think that's a really big thing, is maintain like each day, at least for an hour, man. Like, what do you do that lights you up? Do you have spaciousness in your life for the things that actually really get you going? And most of us, maybe not most of us, many people, I think we keep on having these false summits after false summits of like, eventually we'll start enjoying our life when. And, the sooner that you can get over that whole lie and just start enjoying your life today, the sooner you start to discharge stress with regularity.
Just going back to what Joe said about the 9-to-5 worker, someone who is sitting down a lot, and like you said, it's fine to sit down, but it's the frequent amounts and the time that's spent sitting down, which leads to the quote, sitting is the new smoking. And on that, I was thinking, obviously sitting down, we know it does things, to the thoracic vertebrae, or, it leads to your shoulders rolled and you're hunched over, your chest becomes tight. Other than those things that we all know about, what is so bad about sitting, and why have you come to say that it is the new smoking?
I don't think it is new smoking. I say again, I go exactly against that. James Levine's guy said, I have a lot of respect for James. I cite him in the book a lot, but it's not a complete statement. So sitting is a completely natural, beautiful, healthy, nutritious range of motion for the human body. You just have to define sitting. So if sitting is that same repetitive motion that we were referring to before, and you do that for thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of your life, then it is new smoking. But you could just say sedentary, repetitious movement is the new smoking would be a more well-defined statement. So sitting could be a malasana squat, while you're smoking a cigarette in Thailand waiting for a bus. Like you're sitting, that's great. And you're down regulating with a cigarette. You're having your little ceremony of chilling out, and you might be looking out into the distance as you puff on the cigarette. I'm intentionally using the cigarette, getting at it, because I'd rather take that person that does that than the healthy person, in quotations, that's stuck in that sedentary, locked in their office, staring into their cell phone position. Person that grabs a cigarette, I'm not saying that people should smoke cigarettes. I don't think it's a good idea. But nonetheless, on my kickball team, I would take the person that goes out, takes a break, has a discharge and a down regulation moment, looks out into the distance, goes into a deep squat, maybe sits in some grass, maybe takes their shoes off, hangs out in some trees, and just puffs down a cigarette, maybe even two. I'd rather have that person on my kickball team than the super healthy person that's up in their penthouse suite that's locked into their cell phone while they're sitting in a chair. There's so many health-inducing variables in that process of just popping a squat. And that cigarette stuff I'm just kind of being cute with. I don't think people need to smoke. So, and then within that, it would be, like I mentioned before, the whole, hashtag floor culture thing. You just working on your computer or whatever while you're in some of those seated positions I mentioned before, that's yoga. Crisscross applesauce, a fancier word for that would be called sukhasana, or a lotus position is something that very few people can do, but nonetheless, that's like sukhasana is an easy position. That's yoga, and so you can start to integrate those same basic principles and concepts of yogic asana into your daily life, instead of needing to pay a yoga practitioner and driving 25 minutes and sitting in that hunched over position and then going through the class and then going back into your car and sitting in that same position. It's like, dude, your time in your car was the length of a whole freaking yoga class. And then you use the yoga class to unwind that experience. Like, what if you just made that be more like your life? And then the time in your car is no big deal because you have such a rich buffer of health throughout the rest of your day. But there's like a Joe Campbell quote that I start the book with is we're standing on top of a whale while we're fishing for minnows, and the minnows that we're fishing for is all the exercise equipment and the supplements and all the stuff. And it's like the whale that I don't think enough people see, and I think people are starting to see it more, is the way that you inhabit yourself. Like, how do you exist in your body? Instead of just waiting to reach out for something to heal me, like, what if I go in and start paying the freak attention to how I inhabit this physical structure? It's a really big deal.
It's kind of like the people that drive to the gym to walk on the treadmill, right?
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like literally unbelievable. And that's what I'm saying with, when you think of all of that wasted energy, all of the fuel that it took to, not just the cost of the fuel itself, that fuel had to travel from Alaska or Iraq or whatever, across the world to bring your fat ass to the treadmill. What are you fucking talking about? Like just take a walk. And when you're doing that, you get to exercise the rest of your physiology. We're missing out on that. We're doing a supplement form of fitness the same way we do a supplement form of sun. And then we wonder, why these statistics are the way that they are. And statistics can be bullshit too. There's like the Mark Twain, there's lies, damn lies, and then there's statistics. So I think statistics can oftentimes kind of fit whatever your thesis is, which in my case, it would be like Western culture is hurting us. So I acknowledge that as well, and I can also become overly biased and dogmatic towards the whole affluenza thing. But yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Yes, so interesting. It's like one of the main things I suppose which you were, or which you did convey in your book is a sense that I suppose whatever we are doing essentially is a chance to do that yoga thing, right? It's like
That's correct.
Yeah, that is one of the main things which you were trying to convey, wasn't it?
And that's the meaning of yoga. Yoga has so little to do with asana. Like asana is a very small fraction. It's an eighth, of the 8 limbs of yoga. And the intention so asana just means like doing the stretchy, exercisey bits of yoga, going to a yoga class. And, those movements are to prepare a person to be able to sit in contemplative meditation. But the yoga, the word itself, is a Sanskrit word it comes from yuj, meaning yoke or union or connection or integration or, any of those words. And so you can create yoga in your relationships. You can create yoga in your business. You can create yoga in your relationship to the planet, the environment, your community, yourself. That it's the actual down dog and all those movements is actually a very small percentage of yoga. And if you could start to instill some of those broader principles of yoga into your daily life, that truly is a foundation of fitness. Because back to the emotional element of the human animal, if you're emotionally sick, you're physically sick. If you're physically sick, you're emotionally sick. It's one and the same thing. So the way that you live your life directly ties back into your own physical fitness. Fitness just means to be prepared, for whatever the feat is that you're participating in. Are you fit for that thing? And so if you can go through each day in service of others, which is a major part of yoga, you'll be fit to exist well in a tribe, and people will appreciate you, which then will send a feedback to yourself that you're appreciated and you appreciate yourself and you're a worthy being to be a part of the tribe. But if you're just like a selfish cunt and you're just gathering, hoarding, you subconsciously realize that people are either posing as your friend because they actually secretly, parasitically want your stuff, or people just generally don't like me. If you can turn that around and make your life be more about like, how do I support you? How do I make your life better? How do we grow together? Like that's a big part of yoga. And then if that's the type of paradigm that you live in, then you're going to feel less inflamed. You're going to feel less anxious. You're going to feel less stress. You're going to sleep better at night. All these fitness metrics start to pour in. So it's all tied together.
Yeah, and I've heard you say before that stress is really at the core of pretty much most diseases. If you track back through the diseases, you will find stress. So if I was to look at the other way of this, I was watching, I was listening to your interviews, I was watching a lot of them. And the one thing which really stood out to me is just how happy or joyous which you seem and which you appear. You seem, I listen to you, you're always laughing, you're always joking, your body language and everything, it really does exude happiness. So one thing I'd love to know is, at this stage of your life, what are the things which bring you the most joy? Just going back to what you talked about earlier.
I think I'm starting to get the most joy from raising other people up and bringing people together and seeing people, sounds cheesy, but like having moments of transformation. Those are the moments to me that are the most joyous, so it's like transforming my present-ish and previous perspectives of kind of like me, self-indulgent, just selfish. Like, how do I build up this brand and this book and this podcast and my own health and my own, just go to school for this and go to school for that and travel here and like build up my story. Most of my life has been very me-centric, which I think is completely okay, to do that through your 20s and early 30s and whatnot, and kind of like establish who the heck am I? Figure that out. I'm presently in a transition of really enjoying shining the light off of myself and onto other people, and so that's what I enjoy. That's what brings me probably the most joy right now. I really enjoy teaching workshops and seminars and seeing people's perspectives shift in an instant through just a couple words or a couple actions, or that to me is like a very rewarding moment.
Before we carry on with this body language and the effect on the brain, I just wanted to throw it back for a second, because I'm fascinated with this idea of the body and the movement. And having worked in the fitness industry, and one of the main questions people always ask is, how do you do the perfect squat? And one of the things I was told was, and the best example of a perfect squat is a toddler. You look at any baby or toddler, they know how to squat perfectly. If they pick something up off the floor, they don't arch their back, they squat down perfectly to pick it up, and they come back up.
Yeah.
And it's just a case of, you sort of unteach yourself that. And I just wonder, would you say that the body already has its capabilities and the knowledge for this sort of range of movement? It knows what it's doing. It's just a case of us unlearning that.
Yeah. I mean, that's an Albert Toffler quote that I have in the book. This is the how's it go? I missay it sometimes. This goes, the successful people of the 21st century will be the ones who can learn, unlearn, and relearn. So we've learned kind of misinformation, I would say, that goes, beyond just squatting. There's a lot of misinformation that we learned growing up. But structurally, mechanically, we mislearn a lot of different things from watching our parents and watching our teachers and watching the mold that we all inhabit ourselves in. But a child, yeah, they squat pretty darn good. And they have, even like a fetus has facets in around their tibia on the ankle joints that they actually, it's like almost like a sliding surface or sliding plate for that ankle joint to go into a deep, called dorsiflexion, to go into a deep squat position, like a third world squat or like a toddler squat. So that position is innate to your human physiology, like from, that's a stock part on every body. And then we get away from it for long enough that we essentially almost start to like calcify around those ranges of motions, and then having to relearn, or unlearn the structures and then relearn anew to get ourselves back to that. We can get ourselves back to that, but it just takes consistency, and it takes time, and it takes patience. And so that's why my whole book, The Align Method, is all about that. It's how can we instill really subtle, principle-based tactics into your daily life that are like so simple, it's almost like they only just make you feel better, and they're free to immensely cheap, and with time those aggregate and you have serious progress, as opposed to it being some like blowout Taibo P90X, something like that type fitness program. It's not that in the slightest bit. There's enough. It took you 30 years to be stiff and feeling kind of like shit in your body. So it's like, okay, let's give it a year, of intentionality, of just starting to integrate some really, really basic fundamental principles, and let's see where we're at. But I guarantee if you even start to integrate any of these principles into your life for 3 days, you're going to notice huge change, and it'll become quite addictive, because we're addicted to progress for good reason. But the real shift that you're going to see, and oftentimes it ends up being almost like these like overnight quantum leaps where you couldn't do something for 20 years, and then all of a sudden, like, you're at the gym or wherever, you're like, wow, I can like pistol squat now. Like that I have no idea. It must have had the right combination, like coffee and butter or something. I don't know what it was, but like I could just do this. And that's the way progress happens. It's how big jumps happen. I think it's like you just do the right thing over and over and over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, March 23rd, 2021, you're like, bam, I can do that thing that I've wanted to do for the last 15 years. Like crazy. I have no idea what happened. It might have, but what it is that you were just intentional for, the last however long you were intentional for.
That's definitely something which we'd love to touch on now, is the combination between the body and the mind. And listening to the stuff in which you talk about in terms of your posture, how it affects your thoughts, how it affects your behaviors, all these other things, it made me sort of think back to some pickup books which I read in university, right? But in terms, I know you even mentioned this, how important body language is in terms of a mate. So let's imagine that for this little question, that you are a pickup coach, and you are instructing someone on say a guy who's gone out to a bar on how to attract a woman just based on body language. What would you have to say to that?
You want to feel confident, but not cocky. So how would you, unless in that moment it calls for something else, but for the most part, a woman or man or anybody, really, we're all attracted pretty much to pretty similar things, is someone that feels very safe, very, very stable, very supportive, but also feels flexible and feels creative and feels fun and feels funny. So all of those are structural descriptions as well as like mental, emotional personality traits. So in the book, I have like 5 postural archetypes that I get into with this. And so a person, if you are in the book, I would refer to them as a swall personality or postural archetype.
Sorry,
swall
as a what? As a
swall, SWOLE. It means like a person that's like chest puffed
swole.
out, like muscle swole, swole. Yeah, exactly, swole. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So chicks don't like swall guys that much. There's a percentage for everybody, and everybody's got a match out there somewhere. But typically swall, so a person that is going out of their way to show that they're strong. And I drive a Lamborghini and I have this $12,000 watch and all that stuff. It's not very attractive, unless it's like specifically like a woman that's kind of like a parasite, that she wants to like pull from that place. Like, you'll get that is for sure. But that would be an indication that the body is actually insecure and they're overcompensating in order to show the room that they're big enough, strong enough, fast enough, wealthy enough, all that stuff. And the person in that form would confuse that with confidence, but in fact, confidence would be toned back just a little bit. So a confident, and then the opposite of that would be someone that's like, mopey is what I call it in the book, the mopey archetype. So they're hunched over, they're collapsed, they're not making eye contact, their hips are kind of facing the door, they're like seem like they don't want to be there. That's going to be the other side of that, and that's not going to be attractive either. So it's like, what is it called? The Goldilocks principle. It's like in between there is going to be the most comfortable place, where it's like you have yourself together, you're stacked. I call it the aligned archetype. But you're not going out everywhere to show that. So a person that's in that place, their traps are relaxed. They have length through their cervical spine. Their eyes are open, but not too open, and their shoulders and hands are relaxed. And if you could literally draw a pin, a plumb line down essentially from this person's ear down through their shoulders, down through their hips, down through their knees, down through their ankles. And that person that's very balanced and stacked in their body, they're not exhibiting any physical characteristics of someone that's going out of their way to show anything. But they also look very strong and they look very confident because they obviously are in order to have that form. So that would be, structurally speaking, it's all the same principles, for anything else. If you want to be an effective athlete, that's going to be the same principles as being an effective pickup artist.
Yeah, just as you were saying this, I can imagine that just as a guess, obviously we live on different continents. I'd have no way, but I can imagine that throughout your life you would have done very well with women, Aaron.
I've been closed off. Like I've been kind of like fearful of intimacy in some respects, and so. Even if there was women that were attracted to me, I was kind of like closed off from that in large part. Recently, I've become like more, I guess, like have a better relationship with myself and more like self-acceptance, which all of a sudden that's created somewhat of like a greater cascade of feminine attention, which is really cool. But no, it's been kind of the opposite for me, actually.
Really? So was it in terms of sort of maybe similar to me, where you feel as if you don't want to hurt someone, or was it sort of like that? Or?
I don't think so. I think it was more just feeling like insecure, not feeling like really, really like confident and good. Yeah, a lot of the people that you. So I come from being more like the swall archetype, which is confusing to people because the swall person seems like they have it all together, but oftentimes their togetherness is a byproduct of lots of compensation. So I've compensated physically, I've compensated maybe intellectually, I've compensated in various different directions, and I'm starting to get to the other side of that, I would say, of actually just feeling a bit more content, just like, just being.
If someone was watching this now and they saw the book cover and they looked on your Instagram and they saw the veins bulging out of your biceps and all these things, I mean, I can't imagine anyone would possibly think this. So I'd love to know, how are you dealing with this and how are you working towards that self-acceptance and, as you say, getting to that place where you can achieve those higher levels of intimacy?
Yeah, I think honestly, like, I've had value from some degree of like material success, like doing the book, and I think there is something to actually having your world start to kind of reflect your vision, and gathering that momentum. And then also it's having the eyes to see the reflection in the first place, because we all have little wins. We all have little victories. Just some people choose unconsciously typically, but choose not to see any of them. And they just see why they suck. So shining more light on, what victories have I had this month, this week, this year, this decade, and am I in a better place than I was 6 months ago? And if I am, and even if maybe it seems like I'm not, like, find a part that you are, because there's probably something. If you've been investing any degree of bandwidth in anything meaningful at all, there's probably something that's better than it was 6 months ago. And so really in making an intentional practice of focusing your energy in observing your wins, I think that can be a powerful feedback, because your brain will be occupied by thoughts regardless. So you're kind of like the architect of those thoughts. So I would take control of that.
Yeah, that's so interesting to talk about, taking control. And one of the ways in which we know, which you talk about, is how your body language can really affect that. So I wonder, could you go into this idea of, say, the depressed person would typically be hunched over with their head down, not making eye contact. And what could that person do just in terms of shifting their body language to feel a much more positive and maybe joyful state?
Well, another principle in the book is just hanging each day. There's not anything, in my opinion, that is that meaningful, that's like expensive or, that even challenging for that matter. I think most things that the human organism needs to be healthy, well, and prosperous and all that are really simple, accessible, and just a matter of consistency. And so if a person is kind of hunched over and collapsed, shoulders rolled forward, all forward head posture, the simple act of getting a pull-up bar in your home, put it in between a doorway that you walk through with regularity, and just do a little 10-second hang every time you walk through there. I recommend 90 seconds a day. Right now I have like a hang challenge on Instagram that people are doing. So doing that every day is something that will literally open up that shoulder girdle, reduce shoulder pain and shoulder impingement, open up the spaciousness in around your ribs and your intercostal muscles, help with your respiratory efficiency and even your cardiac function and your organ function. You need to decompress yourself with regularity, especially when you live in a compressive world. So that would be it. I mean, there's lots of other things I could say, but it's like most of the things that I think people will actually be able to walk away with and use and have the biggest impact, like, they're real simple, and hanging would be a primary one.
I read a book back in December called How to Talk to Anyone, and one of the examples he gives, or one of his principles, he calls it hanging by your teeth. So it's as if when you walk through a door, you imagine that there's a piece of string that as soon as you walk through a door to meet new people, that string in your mouth pulls your smile up straight away. And it talks about the connection between facial expressions and emotions. Is that something you believe in, and how powerful do you think that is?
I mean, it's not something I believe in. It's something that's absolutely true. Like, we're always attuning to each other. So like right now, I'm like recovering from being kind of sick and out of it, and I've got a lot of crap going on right now. So I've got like a client coming in like 10 minutes, and I've got like there's like things happening. So you guys probably, when you started this conversation, you guys were like very bright, and I think you've been probably attuning to me that I'm a little bit more like serious right now. And so I mean, it's happening in this conversation. It happens in any conversation. We're always doing that because we appreciate people that are like ourselves, and we are continually attuning. There's like mirror neurons that literally fire in a similar way as someone else. So when someone whacks their finger or smiles or whatever, like you literally experience that. You viscerally experience that sensation in yourself. And the reason for that, one, because I think we're all connected, but two, it's because we don't love anybody more than ourselves. We love our children, but that's like quite literally an extension of ourselves. And so when you can connect with somebody, in order to connect with somebody, they pretty much need to see a part of themselves in you. And the fastest way to make that rapport happen is to essentially like mimic them. So when we're connecting with each other, if our facial expressions are similar, if maybe our style of dress is similar, if our mannerisms are similar, if we both happen to share an accent, that would be a really big deal. If you don't share the accent and you try to force an accent, that's going to be very offensive. It's going to work the opposite. But all of that, what it does is it causes that person to say, oh, like, I like this guy. I know this guy. I recognize this guy. It's like, well, yeah, it's because you recognize yourself in this guy. So yeah, we're always doing that. There's no way around it.
Yeah, we've got just a few questions left. It's been a brilliant conversation, so much value in it, and we really do thank you for coming on the show. So let's just run through some quick fire ones, and then we'll just talk a little bit about the book at the end. So, are there any real quick fire bullet point things which people could start doing today, perhaps the hangs that people could do, and that would take, assuming they compound them day after day, like you said, like let's look at a year, and that it could really compound over the year?
Yeah, I mean, the book's broken down into 5 movement principles for, whatever it says, stronger body, sharp mind, all things. So hanging is one of those things. Another one would be just breathing through your nose with regularity. Another one would be hinging from your hips with regularity. The other one is spending time on the ground. It's like all of those. If you integrate any of those into your daily life, it would make a huge difference. So I'd start with one. There's more to it than that, obviously. And that was only 4 principles as well, I think. But if you integrate just any of those into your daily life, or just like literally give it a week, it'll start to create a huge impact.
So obviously you've mentioned the book. It's obviously going to impact so many people's lives, and one of the questions we ask every guest that comes on: are there any books that you've read in your life that you can attribute to having an effect on you or an impact on you?
Yeah, so many. Well, I mentioned The Man's Search for Meaning. That would probably be like a primary one. So Viktor Frankl, he was a guy that was in concentration camp, like various different concentration camps, and he was a psychologist. And he's been very influential on me. And his just perspective on everything throughout that whole experience makes any kind of bullshit that I deal with and, fret about just feel very nonsensical. So yeah, I would recommend Man's Search for Meaning for sure.
What rules do you love to break, Aaron?
I think I want to respect rules, because I don't want to want to respect things as they are and acknowledge that they've brought, me and culture and everything to where it's come. And there's been a lot of value in things the way that they are. And I like to bend that as well, because, that's like what evolution is being willing to bend but not break. And so a big one, obvious one, would just be the way that what's accepted in the present model of Western culture is to kind of slouch over and look at your phone and kind of socially isolate and kind of just like be in that kind of hunchy position. If you're in that in public, it feels very normal. It feels very common. If you're more, say you squat in public, or you lunge, or you throw your leg up on the side of a, I don't know, like a brick wall or something like that, and like stretch out your hamstring, whatever the thing is. That's like uncommon to be like more open that way. So that's something that, if you see me in public, there's probably a good chance I'm doing some strange physical position. So that would probably be it.
And let's imagine that every person in the world is tuned into the same frequency, and you are offered the chance to deliver a short but impactful message that means something to you, and you want every person in the world to hear. What would Araron Alexander's message to the world be?
I just love each other, and love even like the dark parts about yourself and about each other is a big thing. I don't think the best way to remove a shadow is by projecting a shadow onto it. I think it's through projecting light. And so that would be my suggestion.
Man, that's awesome. Tell our audience where they can connect with you and any messages about the book you'd love to pass on.
So everything's at Align. Well, the book is called The Align Method. And that's like my child for sure. It's been, the most meaningful project that I've been involved in ever. And it's been, there's everybody's involved in it. Laird Hamilton endorsements, and Wim Hof, and like Kelly Starrett and Pavel Tsatsouline, and all these different great people were involved in it. And it's everything that I've gathered through doing my own podcast for the last 5 years and interviewing all these different folks that I mentioned, and also working with clients for the last 16 years. All of that's infused into that book, which is very simple. That's like a regular description of it. Is just like, wow, it's hard to put down because everything is written in a very simplified form. So you can just kind of like breeze through it, which is great. And then there's the Align podcast, and then everything's at Align podcast. Social media, Instagram's the thing I'm most active on, but the Align book, the Align method would be the primary place to check out, I'd say.
Amazing. And all that will be linked. The book, the podcast, the socials will all be linked in the show notes below. So Araron, thank you for connecting with us. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Araron, it's been such a pleasure having you on, and we're after those comments about the intimacy, we're sending a big hug through the screen.
Okay.
We're sending a big hug, man. Lots of love from Wales, bro.
All right. See you, brother. Have a good rest of the day.
See you,
guys. All right. Bye now.